Haze Gray and Underway by Ken Klemm. In a person's life, certain events stand out in the memory, despite the erosion of the years. One such event for me was the first time I went to sea as a sailor in the U.S. Navy. It was mid-March of 1986, and I had been stationed aboard the guided missile destroyer USS Claude V. Ricketts, DDG-5, for just about a month. I was still getting acclimated to the ship when we set out for a 4-day underway period so that the captain could test the ship's crew in the environment for which it had been designed, and we had been trained. I was a sonar technician, and my job was to search the ocean for ships and submarines that might be shadowing our ship. My duty station was deep inside the ship, away from sight of sky or breath of air. The morning we set out can be best described as Navy weather. The winds were strong, the skies cloudy and gray, and the seas was choppy, even in the port of Norfolk, Virginia. The ship was unsteady even before we left the pier. I felt nauseous as we cast our lines and severed our connection with the pier. I tried to tell myself that it was all in my head and that I was going to be fine. As we left the last shelter of the harbor, the wind-driven waves pounded against the ship's hull, and we began to be tossed in all directions, up and down and sideways. I'd been on the ocean many times before and never gotten sick. But those had been smaller craft and calmer seas. This was a storm, an Atlantic brawl between raging winds and surging seas, and the ship was the punching bag. Down in sonar control, my duty station at sea, I could hear the waves striking against the side of the ship, and I felt every lurch, every jolt, until I couldn't contain myself no longer. And I had to run to the head, Navy for bathroom, and vomit. I was unable to stay at my station on the sonar console because I was so busy running off to the head to vomit. It was a terrible feeling, worse than the most hungover New Year's Day that I could recall. I had hoped that the first time I vomited would be the last, but that was just not the case. The ship continued moving up and down and sideways, and I could feel every movement. Every swell and angry wave pounding the ship was like a blow to my own side. My sonar watch commander told me to go hit my bunk, as he could see I wasn't going to be functional, as sick as I was. I was unable to get my equilibrium, and my stomach was heaving constantly. On the way to the bunk, I had to make yet another visit to the toilet. I had just finished vomiting and was outside the head, leaning against the bulkhead, Navy for wall, when I saw another sailor as green-looking as I felt, rushing to do what I had just done. Seeing him had got me back once more again, despite not having anything left in my stomach. Once more, I heaved into the toilet, and then I struggled to drink some water, if for no other reason than to have something to throw up. It was pure misery. I felt horrible, not only physically, but mentally as well, knowing that I was unable to perform the job for which I had been trained so long at such expense to the Navy. My first experience at sea was a disaster, consisting of waves of nausea that seemed to match the waves pounding against the ship's hull. The storm was strong enough that the ship sustained some damage topside. I couldn't wait to get back to port and off the ocean. For 4 days, it felt like being inside a washing machine, up and down and sideways, then stuck on spin cycle. The underway period was mercifully short, only 4 days, mainly to get to the new crewmen used to life on board a ship at sea, which is vastly different than that of being in port. It was as if the ocean was hazing us newcomers. With the heavy seas and strong winds, welcome to the Navy, the ocean almost seemed to sneer, as I laid huddled in my bunk trying to find a way to get through this sickness. Finally, the weather subsided. We passed through the storm over the first 3 days, after what had seemed an eternity of ups and downs and sideways, and trips to the head too numerous to count. At least on the 4th day, the announcement came over the 1MC, the ship's PA, that I had been waiting for. Now ship station, the sea and anchor detail, which meant that we were returning to port. Not a moment too soon for me. I had just spent 3 days at sea, bobbing like a wine cork on the windswept, stormy seas. I had spent more time over the toilet than at the sonar console. It was a terrible time. It had been a dark and stormy voyage, but it was finally over, and I had passed through. I felt well enough to make my position on deck for the sea and anchor detail, assisting another sailor with lowering the fenders, the large rubber objects placed between the ship and the pier to prevent damage to the hull. I'd heard of baptism by fire, but this had been a baptism by stormy ocean. It was, however, a baptism that served me well, and I'm glad to say never repeated itself. I was aboard the ship from February of 1986 until October of 1989, and went to sea many times during that period, including a 6-month deployment to the Mediterranean in October of 1987. The ship encountered heavy seas at times, once so heavy that we took a 30-degree roll. But after that storm during my first underway period, I never got seasick again.